Welcome back to another episode of Starting Out, a podcast where we share our stories of starting out in this great big world. We talk about our highlights, trials and tribulations, and lessons we've learned along the way. So, as you are starting your journey, we hope you can learn from us. So, Cor, what's the topic for today?
This week's episode, we will be talking about how not to spend your student loans. So we'll be starting off with what our situation was in high school, what we spent the most money on, the limitations we had with our money, and finally, looking back, what we wish we did in high school with our finances. Then, transitioning to university, we'll talk about how we actually managed our finances, some healthy habits that we saw, and of course, our favorite part, some wacky stories of finances that we heard. Because it ain't a starting out podcast if we don't talk about wacky stories. Finally, the big picture and the real truths about wealth disparities and what that actually looks like in university. We hope you enjoyed today's episode.
Today's going to be a really great episode. We wanted to start in high school because it's one of the foundations of your money habits that you are building without even you knowing. You think mom and dad give you pocket change or you had to go do your first job. That's going to set you up on how you manage your finances well into your 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s. So not to scare anybody, but hopefully today's episode and how we started out in our financial journey will give you a little bit more clarity. So basically, I was working with my parents, but I never got paid from them, which is a whole nother topic in itself. But basically, I always had to ask for money. If I want to go anywhere, if I want to do anything, always had to ask for money. Yeah, it was a little weird because money wasn't really talked about. It was just more so we'll always take care of you. Just ask us for money. Yeah, it was very different from other kids in high school because they actually worked. A lot of people in my grade worked at McDonald's, M&M meat shops, which is just a regular meat shop. They had odd part-time jobs here. I know some people cut grass in the summertime. So people were always doing something. Oh, working at the grocery store, packing bags and stuff. Very, very common. Okay, so I asked my parents for money. It's usually in cash, which we'll touch on. But I think one of the big things was my parents actually opened up a checking account for me. So this was, I didn't think it was a big thing, hindsight, but it was a very, 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 very crucial thing. I think this makes you a little bit of an adult of you have your own checking account. And I remember the guy opening the account for me. I think my dad was asking, is there any accounts where it's a joint account between us? How when you're not 18 yet, you can, obviously it all varies in wherever you are, but there was a thing where you can actually create an account where you and the parent manage the account. So essentially a joint account. And then there's the other option was the child takes care of their own money. And I remember the guy at the bank was no, you're going to get your own bank account. And I didn't understand it at the moment, but that literally was very important building block in that foundation of once you have your own finances and you don't have people spying on you in your bank account, it's very, very powerful. So yeah, I feel a lot of people can relate to this or maybe are not as fortunate, but that's just my situation that I was in.
What grade were you in when you and your parents opened that initially wanted to open that joint bank account?
I think I was in grade 12, so maybe I was already 18. I'm not too sure. But I remember I was young. I was in high school when I got my first real account for myself. Because up until then, I was just willy-nilly, walking around doing whatever and holding cash on me.
Yeah. I like how that was the little sliver of independence you had where even the teller was no, you're not going to get a joint account.
Yeah. I think maybe because he's seen how poorly joint accounts can actually result in some situations. So it was a good thing that he was okay, let's keep it separate.
Fair.
You do you.
Yeah.
So how about you? What was your situation like? How were you with money? What were you doing at this point to get that sweet, sweet cash?
For my experience, it's very similar to yours, where I didn't work in high school. So from grade 9 to grade 12, because I played a lot of competitive sports, my time was basically filled with going to practice, going to tournaments over the weekend. So I always envied people who were able to get a job, like, first of all, with minimal experiences, I'd say. Especially looking at my resume back in grade 9, even, I'm like, oh goodness, like, I literally had nothing on my resume. But these people, like you said, were working at grocery stores, they were cutting grass over the summer, so they always had some type of income coming in. So I always envied that. And I think because, like, I never got the chance to do that because I was so busy, right? My time was always filled with doing, like, something with competitive sports. So because of that, if I needed money, I always asked my mom and dad for money, basically. But in terms of what I observed with other people in high school, very similar to yours, where it's just a wide variety of people, where there are also people like me who never got the chance to work just because they might be really busy in other regards of their life. But there were also a lot of people in my high school who actually did work very similar jobs to what you talked about. And it's really interesting to see that, because I often found that those people who actually had the part-time or even full-time jobs during the summertime, those people usually tend to be a little bit more mature in terms of, like, their time management skills as well. Because it's really evident that sometimes, like, over the weekend, where if I didn't have a tournament, I want to ask my friends to hang out, for example, at the beach. But you could see, like, oh no, sorry, like, I have work. I have to work like 9 to 5, for example, or like I have to stock from this hour. So I just found that dynamic really interesting, just because it really didn't seem like you guys were on the same playing field in a way. Like, it almost sounds a little selfish, because I'm like, oh, like, I don't have a tournament this weekend. Like, why can't you drop your work for me? Because at that time, I feel like we weren't mature enough to understand the full concept of, no, like, this person has a literal job and they're bringing in income and they can't just call off work. It's not like a typical 9 to 5 corporate job where you're like, yeah, I'm sick, I can't come in. It's like, you literally have to be stocking meat on the shelves.
It's really great that you said that, because I always thought they were always a little bit more mature, and that they had almost like it figured out in such a way, because I feel like they got access to cooler things. Like, if they wanted to buy some stuff, or like, I remember this girl, she worked at Tim Hortons and she was always able to like drive, because her parents was like, okay, I can give you the car, but you need to go buy your own gas money and then you can actually use the car. So she always had the car because she had the job to fund the car, and if she can fund the car, she can, you know, take us to Tim Hortons so for lunch. So it's like almost like, whoa, you get all these cool privileges to do that. And I'm sure if you had that, I'm sure like you would have felt like, I can empathize with being like, you wanted to go to the parties but you can't, or like you had to do something really mundane, right? Where you're like, I just want to go do something a lot more fulfilling, but right now I'm just like stocking shelves because you're literally 15.
I also think it's really interesting when it came time to like summer vacations or like spring break in high school, because I remember there was such a thing called S-Trip in high school. Yes. It was essentially a trip that the incoming graduate class would take as a whole, like, graduating class together. And usually it'd be someplace nice and warm, like Cuba, Dominican Republic, for example. And it was really interesting because we'll talk a little bit more about this too, but I think that's kind of where I saw the wealth disparity kind of start. Just because I know like some people's financial situation didn't allow them to drop like $2,000 deposit to go on this trip. I don't know, maybe it was just my school, but like the planning committee really tried to like push people to, it was almost like a sales pitch where they almost like push people to be like, this will be the best experience of your life. Like, you will lose your virginity on this trip. Like, they were promoting that. And I was like, oh my gosh. But the point of this was when they were planning that vacation, I just remember in terms of the logistics of what we will do every day, like you could see that some people were like, oh no, like I prefer to like just spend money on the room and like just stay at the beach, right? Like just relax and like not spend any more money that I already have to. But then other people were like, oh no, like I want to take a bus and go into the city. I want to like explore. I want to spend money on food. I want to spend additional money on that. So I guess like that's where I first started seeing the wealth discrepancy between my classmates as well, whereby people were either more willing to spend or less willing to spend on some things.
I think this concept of like FOMO and people taking trips and people doing all that, I don't think it'll ever end. Right. I think it was a good exercise in like this is what is to be expected later on, because I feel like sometimes when you're growing up, like there's a lot of families that get to take a lot of trips and stuff. My family was not like that at all. And then further moving on from that was like, okay, so now you have like this almost like your first time where you can actually take a solo trip without your parents. Yeah, money is a big thing. Money is like, how do you get $2,000, right? Some people it's very easy. It's very, very easy for them to like get $2,000 from their parents. But let's just say Cor and I did not go on this trip. We did not.
We did not. So because we didn't spend any money on S trip and we saved $2,000 on the deposit, in high school, if you were spending money, what did you spend the most on?
I had a guilty pleasure of going to concerts. I freaking loved going to concerts. Music festivals, concerts, merch, anything like that, I absolutely loved. I also think like I really enjoyed the experience of it. Not a big spender in any other way. I just knew how to like, okay, I'm gonna pool my money over here and I'm not gonna go out to like lunch or like I'm not gonna go do any of that crazy things, but I'm just gonna spend it all on concerts.
I really like that because it's with mine, which I'm about to talk about, it's like a one in and then I'm done. But more so, it's you're paying for an experience which no one can ever take away from you, right? Which I understand that if you did go to concert or if you do go to concerts now, you understand that you could buy merch there, and merch can get really, really expensive, and you almost get FOMO in terms of but like I want to remember this concert and I want to buy a sweatshirt from them, but it's like $70 for a t-shirt, for example. I really like that you spent it more so on an experience as opposed to like just like a physical product, for example. I think for me, it was kind of the other way around, but I never got to eat out when I was younger, especially in high school. I always packed my own lunch. Like we had a plaza near our school that had like really nice food and everything that like a lot of high school students would actually go and eat out. It was fairly cheap. I'd say like an average meal was $10, but from grade 9 to grade 11, I never got the chance to eat out. And it was up until grade 12 where I finally went to the plaza during lunchtime. And I'd say that's where I spent majority of my money on, because there was a certain period of time in grade 12 where I think for 2 to 3 weeks straight, I would just eat out for lunch.
That's so funny you say that, because sometimes I'm like, I wonder if like when you restrict yourself, you open the gate and you're like, if I can do this, I'm gonna do it every day and every minute of it. Yeah.
But I think in terms of me saying this, I never regretted that I went to eat out, because I feel like once I opened that door to eating out, I just built a lot more friendships that way too. It's kind of weird to say, but there was always this
No, of course, yeah.
Yeah, there was always this like group of us who would walk there together and we'd eat lunch together, and it was more so like the community and like the friendship aspects of things that I also liked on top of eating out. But I never regretted that decision to eat out.
Yeah, I think the reason why we're bringing up, like, do we regret any of the stuff that we did? It's really interesting because I think one of the bigger things is, especially like in media and stuff, I find that they always like, did you really need that avocado toast? Or like, did you really need like all these things? Like, obviously, to a certain extent, like you can't just blow your entire life savings on avocado toast. But at the same time, there's like so much more to certain things, right? Like you're buying food, but you're also trying to spend time with your friends. I think what I realized was like, yeah, some of my favorite artists can actually die. Like straight up like conk out. And I think I regret the ones that I didn't go at the end of the day. Yeah, like I'm thinking like Kendrick Lamar, Way Home for the very first one, instant regret. Like, why didn't I not do that? Literally my favorite album of all time. Travis Scott.
Yeah.
Like, why did I not go see him? Why did I always think like there was going to be like another time? If you have conviction of like this is going to make you happy and this is going to make you feel great, go for it, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like it's your childhood too to like live up to.
I guess with like, because we both talked about ultimately not working in high school, but getting money from our parents, essentially, whenever we'd ask them. From your situations, were there any limitations with like what you can do with that money? and like any breakthroughs ultimately?
Yeah, I did have some limitations. I think one of the biggest things was like when you ask, it's never consistent. Like the cash flow is never consistent. And nor should it be. Like you have to like wait and you have to like ask.
Yeah.
You have to wait for them to be like in a good mood.
Yeah.
Clean the house, do everything really nice, like on your best behavior. I just thought that I was kind of like silly at some points. That's why I was kind of maybe envious of people like having a job, because then I was like, you actually have the opportunity to actually go and make your own money. Like you can actually like figure it out. Of being like, okay, if I work 7 hours this weekend, I can actually go and do X, Y, and Z. More like in your hands. But I think when you ask, it's like very inconsistent. You have to almost like barter too. But I cleaned the floors 7 times this week. It's really hard, yeah. So I feel like managing people's moods, and then also you just never know what you're gonna get. Like if they're happy with you, you get an extra 100. If you're not happy with you, start scrubbing the toilets. Like, you know what I mean? Like I think that was one huge limitation.
I like how you said that you never expected. It's like you understood that, like you and me, we both didn't have jobs. But it's like we never expected, and like we never had like, okay, on Mondays at 7 a.m. my parents will always give me $20. And I think that becomes a limitation in terms of like you said, inconsistent cash flow. Because what if you wanted to go to a concert and it's like you need a plan for it, but then you're like, oh, I don't know how much my parents will give me this week because it depends on their mood, right? It depends on how many chores I did and how they're feeling. And I feel like there's so many factors that are out of your control because you can never expect something from them. I think for me, it kind of ties into that, whereby a lot of my high school friends were really into thrifting in high school. Because of that, I always wanted to get into thrifting because I really like the idea of it, where you're shopping secondhand, like you're reducing waste. But the problem was especially my mom and my grandma never enjoyed the idea of me going thrifting. Just because I think it's more so of a cultural thing, whereby whenever I brought home like a secondhand clothes, for example, where I get like a blouse from Ralph Lauren, for example, they're like, oh, it's so washed out. Why would you want someone's like dirty secondhand clothes? It makes you look poor. Like, we give you money for a reason. Most important part of this is just because they're giving you money, which of course I appreciated, that money always came tied with expectations, with their opinions.
And we're back into this episode, part of the episode we're going with, where did that expectation come from?
Yeah, it's like, sure, they gave me this money, but when I brought home something that wasn't aligned with their values, they're like, you spent our hard-earned money on this piece of shit.
Yeah.
I think that was like a big limitation with me in terms of like the inconsistent cash flow as well, just because like I also never knew when I was going to get money. When I did, I thought I could use it on something that I enjoyed, but I guess not, because money comes tied with opinions of someone else's, which is totally like I understand because it's their hard-earned money.
Yeah, I'm always wary about when things are given to you, because it's like, and what's the catch? And what is it about this situation? If I say I want to use it for lunch money and then I use it for something else, and then what happened? Did we break the bond of like trust?
Right? Yeah. In terms of trust, my mom and my grandma actually started making a rule where before they handed me the money, they're like, okay, repeat after me. We will not buy used clothes this time. And I was like, oh, fine, we will not buy used clothes. Like, just give me the money.
Yeah, fingers crossed behind your back. Yeah. See, but that's the thing. It's like, right? Like when Lowe's gave me my first paycheck, I think I realized I was like, oh, I can do whatever I want. It was very transactional. Like, I give you my time, you give me my money.
For me, because my parents were like, okay, you can't buy used clothes. So I was like, okay, well, I gotta buy brand name clothes then. Everything has to be new. So that's when I fell into the trap in high school, where I'm like, okay, well, my parents are telling me everything needs to be brand new or else I look washed out. No one wants to date me. So because of that, I fell into the trap of always needing to buy brand name clothes, and it has to be brand new. And a little bit more of a backstory of how that happened. So when I played competitive volleyball, especially beach volleyball, over the weekends there were a lot of people who would come decked out in full Lululemon gear. Lululemon leggings, long sleeve, backpacks, sunglasses, headband, scrunchies, you name it, they have it. And it was crazy because it was almost at that point where I'm like, oh, in order for me to look good, I need to dress the part. And I need to spend like a whole Lululemon outfit, $200, $300 minimum, I'd say.
That's an expensive fit.
Right? Yeah. And I think that's like a huge trap that I fell into as well, whereby, first of all, on one hand, I had my parents telling me, just buy new stuff. Like, right? We're giving you money for it anyways. Just do it. So I was like, okay, sure. And then on the other hand, I go to a tournament on the weekend and I see people decked out in like full Lululemon gear. So I was like, okay, so like I have these two things telling me to buy brand new stuff and to drop bills on bills on bills on these brand name clothes. And I think I'll kind of talk about it later as well, where I carried that with me to university as well. Were there any traps that you kind of fell into?
Yeah, I think so. There was like, I think it's always like the feeling of, I'm just like not rich enough. Is this enough? Because it's clearly not enough, because the other person has like so much more. And it's always coming from like a place of like lacking. I always felt like I'm always off with my stuff. If I bought a new shirt, then everything else looks raggedy. If I bought one thing, then everything else looks like bad or whatever. Yeah, I think it wore away a little bit of like confidence-wise kind of thing, right? I'm sure you felt the same way, where it's like not a fun thing anymore, because it turns into more of like you're playing on this like catch up with everyone. You're trying to like scheme your way of being like, okay, how can I like ask for a couple $100 more to like do the thing that everybody else looks like they have like no problem doing. Yeah, because like there's a lot of kids that were just able to have like access to $5,000 or $6,000 because they had their parents' credit card, and if they maxed out their parents' credit card, like their parents could always pay for it. It was always on the forefront of my mind of being like, I didn't get X, Y, and Z, or I don't have enough. Oh my God, if I don't have enough, then what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And then it was spiraling out of control.
Yeah, I like how we came to the topic of clothing and just kind of like buying brand name, for example, because I remember in high school there were specific staples of clothing that would kind of make you popular, right? So in my high school, it was like TNA leggings or like Lululemon, like the typical black leggings, right? Like if you had those and you wear Uggs and a sweatshirt, that was like a typical like outfit in my high school.
Oh yeah, and like, oh my God, I would go to like Hollister and like search through the clearance bin just to see if like someone put a really nice shirt on sale or something. And even like going to shopping trips with like my friends and stuff, like it was so hard because you're like, Mom and Dad gave me $60, and then you kind of almost have to like play up like, oh yeah, I can like definitely afford this thing.
Or like, it just doesn't look good. I want to buy it, but it doesn't look good.
It doesn't look good, and you're like, I really want it. You really, really want it. And like, I didn't go to a school with, even if you had like uniforms, I'm sure you feel it's always like the accessories.
Yeah.
People find a way to always flex no matter what. Like you can have like nothing. People will always find something to like flex on you for whatever. When you look back at this time, and if you can like give yourself like one tip that you wish you have done at an early age, what is something you wish you have done?
So whenever my parents gave me money, it was always cash that they gave me. Like I said, I never regretted any of the choices that I made in terms of what I actually spent my money on. But if I could kind of maybe allocate it a little better, I would, instead of just spending that cash, I would maybe look into even just putting it into a bank account instead. Just because at that time, I never understood the real value of cash. Because now I understand that it will always, $10 will always be $10 if it's cash. But if you put it into a bank account, because of interest and everything, it will actually become like $11, for example, in a year. So I wish I kind of did that in high school. Instead of spending all of my money on food, I wish I could maybe allocated it better and perhaps put some cash into the bank account. How about yourself?
Yeah, I think it's like, okay, so you have cash. And I'm pretty sure I essentially did the same thing as you. It's like I put it into a checking account. I was so scared to even open a savings account because I thought you were not allowed to do that until you're older. Where did I come up with that rule? I don't know. But I think it was only until I got my first job, which is like literally last year, when I figured out, I'm like, oh my God, this is all a business. They want you to put money in certain places because it makes them money. I can put my money anywhere. So if I can put my money anywhere, I'm supposed to make money on top of my money. And I never understood that. And if I could just go back into time, and I wish I just spent just even the tiniest amount. I freaking wish I bought an ETF. If I bought a freaking ETF 10 years ago, I would have been more well off today, knowing that something is growing without me touching it and something is making money off of my money, which is fantastic. I guess that's why we learn lessons in life. It's never too late, but I just really wish I did that. I wish I had the foresight. And I think maybe that's why also it's like, if your parents never talk to you about stuff like that, or like they're like, oh no, I'll take care of you, don't worry, you never end up having this revelation.
Let's bring those lessons and experiences into university. So when we got into university, Neeqs, what was your financial situation like?
Okay, so I had a student loan, not financially independent at all. Still needed my parents to help me out. And I think it's because they never paid me, they were always going to be like, if you work for us, we'll pay for your schooling and stuff. So in a really warped, twisted way, yes, I did work, but like the money was never in my account. So technically, I just had to always ask for it. So that still carried on into university. What ended up alleviating a little bit of that help and always asking for help was through grants and scholarships. So I always went and I learned how to apply for stuff like that. So that was really helpful. I remember my first student loan payment, as in like you have to pay the school, like you get the loan now, you have to pay the school. I fucking wiped out my entire bank account. I was like, this is not even real at this point. I'm like, I've never seen like thousands and thousands of dollars just, 1 minute I have it and the next minute I don't. And I think it was just a really weird situation. So I didn't even think it was mine to begin with. And then eventually, like if you listen to past podcasts, like I had a job at Lowe's, literally did not make any money. Like literally not. And then I worked at Microsoft, but that again, not real life money either. That was like abysmal. I'm pretty sure I was losing money. TBH. So I guess what I'm trying to say is thank God for student loans.
Yes.
Because that actually helped out.
Yeah. Same with me. Yeah. Thank goodness for student loans, for entrance scholarships, for grants even. Grants and scholarships are essentially just free money for you. Because I know a lot of entrance scholarships for university, it's like, oh, if you have a certain GPA, you automatically get like a couple $1,000s, like just for free. There are a lot of entrance scholarships that you can actually apply for as well. Like I know a few of them in high school where they're like looking for community service, for volunteering, like how involved are you with your community and everything. So similar to me, very similar experience. Had a student loan. I was not financially independent, so my parents still pay for like my phone bill, etc. I had a little bit of savings just because even in high school I worked like here and there throughout for my parents, and like they would still give me allowance, so I still had like a little bit in my savings, but obviously like peanuts. Going into university, obviously, like Neeqs said, if you listen to our previous episodes, we did get a couple of odd jobs here and there over the summer, during the school year, internships and co-ops. So what did you wish you would have known or did differently? And even telling our listeners now to perhaps adopt and look into when they still are young and get the chance to do.
Yeah, I think, okay, so when I was in grade 12, I worked at a accounting firm. Didn't even get paid over there either. It's freaking volunteer. I think I got like a little thing of money one time here and there. And I remember this girl, she was sitting there and she was older than me. She, I think, was ready to graduate university. And I just asked her, I was like, okay, like if you had any, or like I'm really worried about my student loans and all that stuff. And she's like, oh, no. Student loans is fine. It's just how you spend it, right? She's like, don't worry about like day-to-day things. Like, you have that there. Worry about the miscellaneous things that you're spending. Yeah, you can eat and stuff, but like, there's a lot of girls that end up buying makeup palettes. She's like, that stuff like really added up, and she says it creeps up faster than you think it is. So just make sure you're not buying things that are like too excessive or whatever. And I don't know why, but I always thought about that. She said that very nonchalantly, but like I literally held it to my heart and I was like, maybe I should be a little more careful.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because similar to my experience going into university, I was always like, oh, I get to buy so much Lululemon stuff because I have my OSAP coming in. I had a couple of jobs. Realistically, what I wish I would have done then is really set up a budget for myself. I knew that I had money coming in, right? Like, I worked a couple of jobs here and there, but I never really knew down to the T, like how much was coming in every 2 weeks, how much I could realistically spend, right? Because I still needed to pay rent. I still needed to buy groceries and all of that. So I really wish that, kind of like, I wish I started Finance Sundays a lot sooner, just to really break down my budget and to really see, like, can I really afford a new pair of $70 Lululemon shorts this week? No. No.
I think there was maybe 1 or 2 parents in high school that I knew of that actually sat their kid down and was like, you need to build a budget. What are you going to spend? What are you going to do? Everything down to the line. And I thought that was so interesting, because I was like, I never did that, and I wish I had done it too. But I think I was so scared of even like confronting the issue. Okay, so how much do I have? I'm just gonna eat a bagel for dinner tonight. I'm like, oh, okay, nope.
What's the craziest thing you've done in I think you kind of touched on that, but what's the craziest thing you've done in university?
I'm like outing myself
in regards to money.
I think, okay, I'll salute myself for doing this, because I'm like, okay, now I know that like I can survive with very little, and like I appreciate things a lot more because like I know how much it takes to actually get something. When I was in my 3rd year university, I got into Microsoft and I was like, okay, I should go on a trip. And my friend was doing an exchange program in Copenhagen. I remember, like, I think my friend paid like $900 or something, or like $1,000 or something ridiculous for like a round trip flight to Copenhagen. And I was like, I don't have that type of money. I want to make sure that I can like have fun and eat and do everything I want in Copenhagen. And I remembered I picked like a midnight flight at a Pearson International, which is like our Toronto airport, to Portugal. And I saved like $500 by doing that. And then I slept on the floor of my friend's apartment for like 10 days straight. Pretty sure have back problems still this day because of that. When there is a will, there is a way. I was like planning to go to Europe for a month. You can see how expensive that is.
Yeah.
And I was thinking of every little aspect of my life. I think there was even that thing where it's like my friends were making fun of me. They're like, Anita, you didn't leave the house? I was like, why on earth would I leave the house? If I leave the house, I'm gonna spend money. And I'm like, I can't leave the house. And they're like, what the fuck? And I was like, no, you gotta do what you gotta do. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I just ate bagels straight for 2 months. Like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I was like, well, we're just gonna eat a bagel. And I think my proudest moment was like trying to get my grocery bill to like down to like $60 a month.
That's really good.
I was like, I can do it. Do I recommend it for you? No, I really don't. I really, really, really don't recommend this type of like extreme lifestyle. But there is something to be said about being able to really stretch your dollars.
Yeah.
And then being so freaking resourceful. Because big thing is like, I wanted to go to Europe. I wanted to travel. I want to do it on my own freaking terms. I don't want to ask anybody for money, because then it's like, can a girl really travel alone? Who's going to pay for that? Like, excuse me. Like, if I want to go, I can go. I think people are always like envious of like, oh, how did you go to like all these places? You know, there's a bit of a grind to get to where you want to go. So it is possible. Let me just say that it is possible, but it's how much you want to like sacrifice to make your dreams come true.
I think one of the healthy habits that I do see in terms of your story is to really just be resourceful and, like you said, really stretching your dollar to the maximum possible amount that you can do with $1. What are some other healthy habits that you saw in university?
Good question. My friend's dad actually made my friend take a personal finance course in university. And then their whole shtick is like every single week, she always has to send an article about finance, whether it be stocks, it could be personal finance, it could be a savings account that she found. She had to send one article to her dad, and then her dad will do vice versa, will send her something. And I thought that was so fascinating because I was like, wow, you're really setting up almost like the habit. Oh, what are else people are doing? Like, are you living under a rock with under your finances? That blew my mind. Caveat, she was like, this is so annoying. I don't think she enjoyed it, but it was very interesting to be like, she does that. It's like a practice.
It's interesting because in university, you see a wide variety of people and different spending habits and different earning potentials too. But I think what I saw in university was after people get their OSAP and the money goes into their bank account, like Neeqs said, it's not really yours. But they have the conception, they're like, oh my gosh, I have 10,000 just came in. And you know what? Bottle service, let's go. I knew a couple of people who like went to Toronto for a weekend because usually the first week of class is like you just talk about the course syllabus. So they ended up going to Toronto, ended up buying like bottle service and everything because they think it's their money. They think, oh, I could spend it on whatever I want. Like, what is tuition anyways, right? Like, I don't need to pay that. And there they go, spending money.
From what I saw was like unhealthy amount of online shopping. I had a roommate that had a package come to our door almost every day. And we were like, yo, are you okay? Like what are you buying? This is also another thing. It's like if something didn't go well at school, like say if you got a bad grade or something, there was also like therapy shopping. I don't know if you've ever seen this before. It was like, oh, I didn't get a good grade, so you know what? I'm gonna go and I'm gonna ball out at Aritzia. And it was bad. It was bad. I was like, oh my god, like this is so freaking crazy.
Yeah, therapy shopping. That's such a real thing. That's so funny that you mentioned that. It's really evident in terms of how people kind of cope, like you said, with getting a bad grade, right? What if they failed an exam? Oh, you know what? I'm gonna drop $2,000, fly first class to Europe because my heart needs it. And I think that kind of goes into a lot of the wealth disparities that we saw in university because like you said, some people could like spend so much money online shopping. Like I've seen a lot of students and a lot of classmates like online shop during class and they'd be on like Supreme website. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I can't afford that. Yeah, and I think especially in high school, because you probably grew up with people in your high school, you've seen them, like you know who their family is, you know a lot more about their situation. I feel like in that circumstance, you know more about what their financial situation is. But transitioning to university, you're definitely going to see a lot more wealth disparities between a whole variety of people just because like there's going to be thousands and thousands of people in university and you don't know each person's financial situation and their like household financial situation. So what's interesting, what I saw was there were people who went on like month-long trips, for example, like after fourth year, usually it'd be a big thing where you plan like a really huge trip. I know a couple of friends who plan like a 4-month-long Europe trip, for example, because it's like a gift to themselves before they start full-time work again and like become a real adult. But I find that really interesting because a lot of people in fourth year were already really scared and already really nervous in terms of paying off their student loans. Even though in Ontario, interest doesn't accumulate for 6 months, but people were already like on the edge of their seats, like, I don't have a full-time job lined up. I don't have any interviews. Like, I don't know how I'm going to pay off their student loans. What's really interesting is, oh my gosh, you should come with us. It'd be fun, right? You should come with us for 4 months. People don't have money for that. People can't afford a plane ticket to Europe. People can't afford to like spend money on Airbnbs. And I just find that so interesting because like you have such a wide variety of people that you see in university.
Yeah. When it comes to wealth disparities, I think it's inevitable that you're going to meet a lot of different people, and for every 1,000 people you meet, there's going to be 1,000 different ways they manage their finances. And I think what was so interesting was like me meeting people that are like so wealthy. And I have a funny story about this. I have a very funny story. So I have a friend, and like, God bless her, she's like so nice and so down to earth, and she is of a very wealthy background. She's aware of it, and like she's pretty in tuned. Like, I wouldn't say she was like out of touch or anything, but I think one thing that was so funny was she was like because I was like trying to figure out like if I could check my bag and if I wanted to pay for that, and I was like, I don't know if I want to like check my bag. I'm like, God forbid if I lost my bag, like I don't want to deal with that by myself, and I don't want to be dealing with like one pair of underwear. Like, I was like, okay, maybe I should just like take my bag. And then also I'm like, I don't really know how I'm gonna afford like an extra like whatever for checked bag. So I was like, okay, financially. She was like, no, like I think it's included. And I'm like, no, it's like never included in your flight. And she's like, no, I think it is. Like, I always check my bags. Like, my family and I always bring like several bags, and like they never charge us or anything. Turns out she's never flown economy. She's only flown first class. And then I was like, I think I have your answer of why you've never paid for it. It's because it's included in your cost of your flight ticket, because it's so expensive. And like, you should have, when you're paying that much, of course you should be taking care of everything. But I think stuff like that, like, yes, you can take it the wrong way. Like, you can let it rub you in the wrong way. I thought it was just like, okay, it is what it is.
I think at the end of the day, it's just that don't get bogged down on the little details. Like with your story of your friend flying first class, that's really funny, but like, that's like a truth. That's essentially all she knows. It's like, but then on the other hand, it's like, it's almost everything is on a spectrum. So you have that story, but you have someone who, like you, was like, well, I can't afford a checked bag.
Okay, one day let's manifest this. Like, hopefully one day we can fly first class and be like, yeah, what checked bag? I get to bring any bag I want. And I think one thing I'll leave off with is, say if like you're in a situation where you don't come from a wealthy family, you don't know anything about finances, you maybe even are wealthy and you just have like the worst spending habits. You're starting to panic because you're like, coming to think about it, I racked up $5,000 on clothes this month, and then another $2,000 on eating out and all that. And just to sustain my current lifestyle, I need like $10,000 every month. And like, what job pays for that? Or what kind of trust fund do I need to get into to sustain that kind of lifestyle? Wherever you are in your situation, it's never too late to course correct. And start some good habits now. You will thank yourself if you have a little bit of discipline in your life when it comes to money. And then if you even start the journey of creating good habits for yourself, and I think it will come back tenfold for you. Like, it will really benefit you later on in life. Yeah, if you're like in a situation where you're like, I'm so sick and tired of asking my parents for money, or like, I can't do what I need to do with the limitations that they set on the money, if you start today, it will help a lot. Because you and I can attest to that, where it's like, now we're like so much more in control of our finances.
At the end of the day, don't let the finance control you. We hope that you can control the finances.
Yes. Let us know what kind of crazy stories you came encountered with, either in high school or in university, because we're always curious. I think we can always learn. We're not laughing at them or anything, but it's like, I feel like these things are very interesting to talk about, and we can always learn from those experiences. And if you're trying to get yourself out of like a bad financial situation, let us know, because like, obviously we're here to support you. We're like your older sisters of being like, you know what, it's gonna be okay. First step is opening up that bank account and looking at it. If that's all you can do today, you do you, boo-boo. That's really great. So we'll leave it off at that, and we will see you in the next episode. Bye. You have just been listening to the Starting Out podcast. If you liked today's episode, please make sure to rate and like the show. Also, leave us a review. It helps us a lot. To never miss an episode, please subscribe and turn on notifications. We love to hear from you. So if you want to chat with us, tweet us at StartingOutPod. Links are in the description. As always, we are so excited for you to start out on your journey, all while listening to ours. See you in the next one.